Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. We have had a fantastic morning so far. A couple of really wonderful panels. I hope you have enjoyed them as much as I have. As most of you know, we have a very distinguished speaker today, and Commissioner Bernard McNamee, and I want to welcome him to our luncheon today. I'm very excited to hear him address us a little later in our lunch. But I did want to take a few minutes to reflect early here this morning and invite you to please go ahead and enjoy your salad. We have just a few presentations here we want to make this morning before we get into our main course. As most of you know, the annual meeting marks the end of our organizational year, and this has been a remarkable year. I've had the significant pleasure of serving as the president of your bar this year, and I want to thank you for that. And after tomorrow's luncheon, we will be welcoming our very own John Schneider into the office of president, and I very much look forward to celebrating that with you tomorrow. In addition, the boards of the Charitable Foundation of the Energy Bar Association, as well as the Foundation of the Energy Law Journal, also end their organizational year at lunch tomorrow. And we have had two very talented leaders of those bars this last year. And I would like to welcome Donna Byrne, who has served as the president of the Charitable Foundation of the Energy Bar Association this last year, to the stage. Donna, you have served with distinction this year. I am so very indebted to you for your leadership for the Charitable Foundation of the Energy Bar Association, and I want to present to you a small token of our appreciation. I was told I have to move us this way for pictures. I follow directions.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a great year serving as president of the CFEBA, and I want to thank all of my board members and fellow officers who worked to make it such a great year. I've served on the CFEBA board since 2015, including this past year, and what a wonderful array of people I've had the chance to meet and to serve alongside over these past few years, including someone I greatly admire, and that's the late Commissioner Kevin McIntyre, who served on our CFEBA board for several years prior to becoming a commissioner. But I want to go back for a minute and just remind everyone that the CFEBA was launched almost 20 years ago. How amazing is that? It was 2001 when the idea came to fruition, and the plan was authorized to create the CFEBA. It was a joint effort of the boards of directors of the EBA and FELJ. And the CFEBA was incorporated in 2002. And that decision back in 2001 says something to me. It says that the members of this organization wanted more than a professional organization that elevates and maintains the most high standards of professionalism in the practice of law. That the members wanted more than networking opportunities and all of the many great services that the EBA provides. It says to me that the members of this organization wanted to harness the generosity and the talent of this membership to do good things for other people, and I think that that's really commendable, and I am pleased to report to you that because of your generosity, because of the talent and the efforts of so many who have served in leadership over the years, the Charitable Foundation of the Energy Bar is thriving and literally has touched thousands and thousands of lives all around the world. So cheers to you. Tonight at the gala, we'll be presenting a short video to give you a small window into the success of some of our recent campaigns. So thank you for your past support. Thank you for your continuing support. And if you haven't heard about this year's Cornerstone grantee, Educate Haiti, I hope that you'll join us tonight, come talk to me, pick up a brochure, because this organization is really doing superb work, and this campaign is going to change lives yet again by bringing light and fans to classrooms in Darissy, Haiti, where the teachers are already doing a phenomenal job. The children sometimes walk as much as an hour to get to this school. The school has the highest of standards, and the kids that are graduating are among the top 10% across the island of Haiti. So it's really phenomenal, and it makes perfect sense that being able to improve their learning environment is going to just be a game changer for these kids. And they've already poured out their gratefulness. So please be generous. You'll see on your tables that there's a placard that tells you how you can donate from your cell phone. It's quite easy. You're just gonna plug in the number on the card and then the message CFEBA 19, and that'll take you to a link where you can give credit card information. And I know you'll all be generous, so I thank you in advance for that.
Thank you, thank you, Donna. Thank you very much. One little aside, I asked Lisa earlier today, I said, if I text that number to that number, that phrase to that number, does that mean my firm has to pay for the donation? Unfortunately not. But we have another outstanding leader that I want to bring to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Linda Walsh to the stage. Linda has served with distinction and honor as the president of the Foundation of the Energy Law Journal this past year. Significant accomplishments, one being that the Foundation of the Energy Law Journal has stewarded a significant donation to the CFEBA to create a corpus for the CFEBA. She has quite a bit to be proud of, and I couldn't have been happier with her as a leader this year. Thank you. Before we move on, we have a extremely significant event to celebrate at lunch today, and that is the awarding of the EBA President's Award. This is EBA's highest honor. It is made only to those who have made an extraordinary contribution to our profession or to the development of energy law over an entire career. It has only been awarded 7 times in its existence, and of the awardees are 2 members of Congress and 2 judges, as well as other pillars of our bar. It is truly reserved for those who have had a significant impact, and our awardee today stands peer to peer with those who have received this in the past. Robert S. Fleshman has a long history with this bar, and far too many achievements and volunteer opportunities that he's taken on for us to mention today. One of the most significant is his service as the editor-in-chief of the Energy Law Journal. And that's why I have asked Linda, as president of the Foundation of the Energy Law Journal, to say a few words about Bob's experience as the editor-in-chief.
Thank you, Matt. As this year's president of the FELJ, it's my honor to speak about the significant contribution that Bob has made as editor-in-chief of the journal for the past 15 years. In the 39 years of the publication of the journal's had only 3 editors, and Bob is retiring this year after 15 years. During his 15 years, Bob's accomplishments have been numerous. The journal, as you know, is published twice a year, and even before one volume is done, the next volume is in the planning stages. There's very little downtime in the journal's publication cycle. And Bob has led this work volume after volume, year after year, for 15 years. His tireless dedication and his passion for excellence, volume after volume, was surpassed only by his desire to make the journal even greater. And when he was not dealing directly with the publication of the journal in his spare time, he has been a dedicated mentor to the student editors at the University of Tulsa College of Law, which is the FELJ's partner in producing the Energy Law Journal, and the next generation of energy lawyers. Each year, the student board designates new leadership, and each year Bob travels to Tulsa to lead workshops, conduct training, and workshops for the editorial board to enhance their understanding of energy law and help them improve their writing and editorial skills. His compensation for all this hard work and dedication has been the satisfaction of publishing a highly regarded journal, and he imparts that satisfaction to everyone who works on the journal. Under Bob's leadership, the journal has thrived. Bob started at the Energy Law Journal in 2004 and became editor-in-chief in 2005. And since that time, the journal has published 181 articles from a total of 279 authors, 154 committee reports, 28 book reviews, 35 student notes and comments, 11 transcripts of significant EBA panels or speeches, 34 in memoriams. This represents a total of 11,280 pages of content in the past 15 years, which is roughly the same as the content published in the first 23 years of the journal. More significantly, under Bob's leadership, the journal has maintained the highest level of academic rigor as the preeminent energy publication, providing thought-provoking and deeply researched articles. Bob's impact will be long felt after he steps aside.
And if that wasn't enough, that is only a handful of Bob's accomplishments and contributions to our bar. I can't possibly list them all, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Bob served as the president of this bar association from 1999 to 2000 and ushered in, as I understand it, a significant level of professionalism, as evidenced by the name change that he orchestrated from the Federal Energy Bar Association to our current Energy Bar Association, implementing a strategic planning process that we continue to work through today and update, and also helping design our own logo that we have here behind us. In addition, as you heard perhaps before, he's been a significant volunteer with the CFEBA, identifying very worthy causes for donations. He chaired the ADR as well as the Compliance and Enforcement Committees. He developed the Defenders and Enforcement Forum. And now he has been serving on the Nominations Committee for a year and hopefully will continue to serve with us for a couple more years. His contributions are innumerable. And so please welcome to the stage our President's Award recipient, Bob Fleshman.
The timing of this is simply perfect. You have no idea how pleased I am that I'm not getting this posthumously. And I'm not going to thank all of the authors who wrote for the Energy Law Journal, so don't worry about that. I do remember driving to Mount Vernon, New York in 1979 to tell my parents the exciting news that FERC had decided to ask me to join the organization as a public utility specialist, or PUS. When I got home, my parents asked me to sit down. My mother looked me squarely in the face and said, "Bob, your father and I love you, but we have just one question." I said, "What's that, Mom?" She said, "We're wondering, what the hell's a PUS?" I couldn't make that up. I told them I was a public utility specialist. They looked at me somewhat blankly, and the rest is history. I do want to share with you today a bit of history, talk with you about a very special jacket, describe how I view this award, and then offer some thanks. In 1941, FDR gave his State of the Union address and spoke of the values underlying democracy. He looked to a world that would be founded upon 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. Those 4 freedoms became the rallying cry for the Second World War and the foundation for the United Nations. I visited recently a very special exhibit at George Washington University devoted to Norman Rockwell and his paintings of the 4 freedoms. Raise your hand if you've ever seen those or know about these. Lots of people do. According to Rockwell, they were not easy to produce. In the middle of the night, he remembered a small town meeting hall in Vermont where a man stood up to offer his opinion, and most of the people in the room disagreed with it. But when he thought about it, he said, "You know, they let him have a say. No one shouted him down. By gosh, that's it. Freedom of speech." His painting depicts a rugged Lincoln-esque figure wearing a blue checkered shirt and a suede jacket. The Saturday Evening Post first published this illustration in February of 1943, and they published it along with a parable, which was an imaginary conversation between Hitler and Mussolini, I kid you not, they were talking about purging freedom of speech from their countries. I had never read this parable before. I found it chilling. Rockwell's painting, to me, reflects the notion of the common good, civil engagement, and civil discourse, which are the foundations of a civil society. Across from the painting was a jacket under glass that was worn by Rockwell's model. When I looked at it closely, it was frayed and it was tattered on the arms and on both sleeves. To me, it's emblematic of how the fabric of American society is being frayed and in danger of being ripped asunder. Words matter. Words are the lifeblood of lawyers, as we know, and critical tools of the trade. We learned in law school how important it was to choose our words wisely and carefully. The unspeakable horror of innocent Americans slaughtered in places of worship by people who believe the false, venomous, and destructive words which litter social media and the internet bring into sharp focus the power and danger of words. In my view, racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-immigrant words have no place in this country. And words also matter. Words also matter. Words also matter in the world of energy law, policy, and regulation. The independence and integrity of our regulators and our enforcers are critical and integral to ensuring rule of law. And when words flow that indicate bias or unwarranted political influence, confidence in rule of law suffers. You've heard a bit today about the Energy Law Journal. It's often known as the crown jewel of this association. And in my view, it's a testament to free speech. To my knowledge, this association has never, ever tried to influence the journal's content. And this association takes very seriously its obligation to ensure that authors and speakers at programs like we have today fairly present all sides of the issue, engage in civil discourse, and identify policies that will resolve problems. There are at least 2 opinions, and Harvey Ryder knows this very well, who's taking over as editor-in-chief right after me. There are at least two opinions in every edition and every article in the Energy Law Journal, but only one set of facts, and there are no alternative facts. Not a one. I'm often asked, about how much time, Bob, do you spend on the Energy Law Journal and the Energy Bar Association? You've been doing this for 25 years. Come on, you must know. The truth of it is, I never kept careful track, and that's because my approach to work and to the Energy Law Journal and also to the energy law profession has been guided in part by two baseball icons, Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken. And one of my sons is here today. He hates the Yankees, but I'm going to say Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken again, a Yankee and an Oriole, who simply tried to do their very best, day in and day out, without counting every hour precisely. I've also been guided by Groucho Marx, who said, if you're not having fun, why you bother? I'm very honored to be receiving this award. Oh, it's not here, it's over there. To receive this award, and humbled to be joined in the pantheon of leaders who have received this award. Although it's presented to an individual, it's a reflection of the Energy Bar Association's mission, of its values, and its principles. In a sense, it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, and thus somewhat bittersweet, for it means that more days are behind me than in front of me. The sweet part is, though, that I'm very optimistic today, as I see an energy law profession that is more diverse and inclusive than ever, that's more technologically savvy, and that has a deeper understanding of the importance of addressing issues at the intersection of energy, the environment, and climate change. Now the thanks part, and I'm keeping in mind a pearl of wisdom from Will Rogers, which has never missed a chance to shut up. And I had promised this wouldn't be that long, so I'm almost there. I want to first thank Jennifer Waters, one of the former past presidents of this organization, for asking me 25 years ago if I would consider a position on the board of directors. I'd like to thank my past colleagues and employers, Baltimore Gas Electric, Constellation, Covington, MoFo, Morrison Foster, I love saying MoFo, and now Kirkland and Ellis, who have provided the necessary support for me to serve the energy legal profession. Thanks to my clients, and also thanks to those of you on the other side of the table from me, you know who you are, and in a number of different situations, I may not have agreed with your position, but I respected it, sometimes quite strongly. To fall in love with someone is a gift. I've been blessed over 45 years ago to have fallen in love with my partner in life, Lori Reamer, who's here today. And Lori, I apologize for not practicing that part of it with you last night. And thanks to my sons, one of whom is here today, Michael, for keeping me grounded, very grounded. In closing, three things. I implore you to remember Rockwell's suede jacket, frayed and tattering, and ask, what can you do? What can you do to restore the civility and collegiality in our society and to promote the four freedoms? Here's a question I posed 20 years ago, almost to the day that we created this Energy Bar Association and the logo and everything else. And I asked, if you won't be better tomorrow than you were today, then what's tomorrow for? And finally, focus deeply on what matters most in life. Do your best day in and day out to just ignore the things that just don't matter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all. If you will indulge me for just a few more moments, this is a bit of a swan song for myself as well, as I will be stepping down as president tomorrow at lunch. And I just wanted to recap a little bit on our year and recognize some folks who've been very significant to me. First and foremost, I want to thank Lisa, Michelle, and all of our professional staff for all that they do day in and day out. They are association professionals, and they have educated me and worked very closely with me as teammates for a number of years leading up to this one. So thank you very much, Lisa. I also want to thank the board of directors of the EBA, the Foundation of the Energy Law Journal, and the Charitable Foundation of the Energy Bar Association for their leadership and hard work. And I want to thank each and every one of our volunteer members of our bar. None of this can be accomplished without all that you do, and we greatly appreciate it. When I began our year, I wanted us to focus, and I announced that we would focus on our strategic planning goals, and we have done that. And some of the results that we've produced is that we have streamlined our training of our chapters and our committees and begun to think of those differently than training. In doing those trainings, they've really become an information exchange in that we at the Energy Bar Association can exchange information with our chapters and our committees, and they have a lot to teach us about what's going to work for them. So we want to keep that communication going. We have developed a profit-sharing program for our chapters that put on successful annual meetings, and we encourage them to take advantage of that. We have engaged the Professional Education Council, and they are off to a running start. We have also started up a couple of task forces that are near and dear to me. We had our first reports from the Masters Council, from the In-House Council, and the Energy Practitioners Council this year, and I'm very glad to hear that next year those task forces will continue and will continue to develop on the work that we've done this year. When I started in this association, funny enough, two of the first people I met were John Schneider and Jane Ruger. And I remember coming into a room as a young lawyer volunteer, the Young Lawyers Council, and being quite intimidated. And they both greeted me warmly and brought me into the fold. And it's sort of funny and poetic that they are now the president-elect and the vice president. I couldn't have better teammates. Speaking of teammates, I want to just thank a couple more people who really have been with me throughout my entire time volunteering with the Energy Bar Association. Jane Ruger and I were the leaders of the Young Lawyers Council and started together in that. And we grew up in that council. And when Jane went on to other volunteer opportunities, Shannon Pepin Coleman joined me. And then when I joined the Professional Education Council, I was partnered with Jana Chesno and Dan Simon. And they all taught me so very much. And we did good work together and learned to work together in really collaborative ways and really value this bar. When I joined the board, I was so very pleased to work with two people that are friends and colleagues and have grown to be much more than that, and those are Emma Hand and Bob Weishar. I was so pleased to serve with them and work on special projects with them. And last but certainly not least is someone who has grown into my personal mentor, and that is Rich Meyer, who took me under his wing throughout my career, and I owe a debt of gratitude to you, Rich. So with that, I want to thank you for indulging me, and please enjoy your lunch, and we'll have some remarks from Commissioner McNamee a little bit later. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Tom Millar. I'm an attorney with Wilkie Farr and Gallagher here in DC. I'm one of the chairs of the Professional Education Council, and I have the honor today of introducing Commissioner McNamee. Commissioner McNamee was appointed by President Trump in October 2018 and confirmed by the Senate in December. He brings a wealth of experience in energy law and policy to the Commission. Before he joined the Commission, he served in a number of legal and policy positions at the state and federal level, including at DOE as the Executive Director of the Office of Policy and Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy. Prior to that, he practiced energy law in private practice, where primarily he represented electric and natural gas utilities before state public utility commissions. We're very fortunate to have him here to speak to us today, so please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Well, hi. Thank you so much for having me here today, and also, please keep eating dessert and such. The dessert will probably be much more interesting than I am. But I want to thank the Energy Bar Association for having me here today, and I also want to congratulate the award winners. It's really neat to see how people dedicate their lives to helping others, to helping the community, and helping the bar. It's something that's important, and I applaud what goes on here. And I think it's important that we always remember that we need to work with each other, regardless of whether we're on a different side of a table, different side of negotiation, or a different place, in a litigation proceeding. I know that there's a number of my FERC colleagues here today. I want to acknowledge them. It's really been an incredible thing to be at FERC and to work with so many smart and intelligent people. I'm very fortunate to work with some great colleagues, including my fellow commissioners. I know Commissioner LaFleur will be here tomorrow. But the staff is really very special. They're really important to making sure that we do good work as commissioners, and they're often the unsung heroes of what gets done. And I'm so glad so many of them are here today. I also want to say thank you for naming your general session with Chairman McIntyre. I didn't get the pleasure of working with Chairman McIntyre, but just the reputation he has is just so impressive, and I think it's something that all of us should think about, because we should all want to be remembered as such a fine human being as he was, somebody dedicated to his work, to his family, but also to other people. And I think that's something that even in his passing is a witness for all of us, and we should always take that to heart. Now, of course, before going on, I got to give you the standard disclaimers. These are my opinions. They're not the opinions of FERC or my fellow commissioners or the staff. Also, when we do Q&A, the ex parte rules apply, so please don't try and put me in a box. I'd really appreciate that. But let's talk a little bit. This is the first time I've gotten to talk with all of you, and I thought it'd be useful to tell you a little bit more about me and, kind of where I came from and what my philosophy is. My background is, as you heard in the introduction, has been both in public policy roles and in practicing law. I spent almost 9 years practicing law with McGuire Woods as both a partner and senior counsel, representing primarily electric and gas utilities before public utility commissions at the state level. So most of my experience was gained certificates of public convenience and necessity for generation facilities, solar, biomass, combined cycle, also getting permitting for transmission lines at the state level, worked on RPS programs, rate cases, transfer control of cogen facilities, energy efficiency and demand response programs, and integrated resource planning. And all that information has been really helpful for me in helping think about how I'm going to be working as a commissioner, not just understanding the electric policy issues of it, but thinking about some practical issues. And there's two levels. One, I always remember being at the state level and going up before commissioners and trying to explain to them, well, Congress passed this law, FERC has done this, and I want you, Commissioner, at the state level to put this round peg in this square hole. So, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way the thing works out. But I'm trying to use the information that I had to help make sure that maybe our orders are clear, that we're able to make sure that the policies that we're trying to articulate, that you all have to implement on behalf of your clients, that we're clear and that they're able to be implemented. But I also saw something much more important when I was representing clients at the state level. And that is how to be a commissioner. When I would show up at the state level, I'd see people that I knew that were politicians who had gotten those positions, people that I'd been against in cases, and I never had a doubt when I stood up before them that they were listening to what I had to say, what the other parties had to say, and they were looking at the law and the facts and the record to make their decision. And that's something very important. We heard the mention about the Norman Rockwell painting, the four freedoms, and the importance of, a person just being able to stand up and have their say. Well, that's what all of us are involved with. That's what our Anglo-American system works on in terms of how we have these cases, everybody gets to make sure that they have their say and that they're heard. And I take that very important as a commissioner. And that's why I'm trying to do my part in making sure that when cases come before me, I'm making the decisions based on the law, the facts, and what's in the record. Not based on politics, not based on what may be policy positions, but making sure that everybody that shows up before us, and I know my fellow commissioners feel the same way, that everybody gets the opportunity to have their say and that they know that they're heard. And I think that has something that transcends any particular case, any particular policy. It's making sure that people feel that they have an opportunity to participate in the system. And that's what so many of you in this room do. You help give a voice to people who think maybe they don't. It might be a big corporation, it might be a landholder, it might be somebody on a small family farm, but all that's very important. Now, that goes into something else that I found very fascinating when I showed up at the commission. A number of people would come to me and say, including from the outside world, and they'd say, "What's your agenda?" I was taken aback by that. It's like, I'm a commissioner, I'm an adjudicator, I don't have an agenda. Now, of course, things that we're going to rule on have policy implications, they have results, there's policy decisions when you make rulemakings in particular. But it goes back to that point. Look at the law, the facts, the record, and make the decision based on that. Listen to what people are having to say. And by doing that, hopefully that we make a better FERC and make better energy policy on behalf of the American people. Now, the other thing we've heard is, when I joined in December of 2018, it's only been 5 months since I started working there. And I keep thinking, gosh, if only I were a first-year associate again, I would just be blowing it out on the hours. It's just amazing how much work there is. But I am in federal government, I am in this role, so I don't have to do timesheets, so that's good. But with the history of FERC, it's been around for 40 years. Obviously it was the Federal Power Commission beforehand. But think about what was going on in the country in 1977 when it was created. We had long lines at the gas stations. We were worried about a lot of things. I think it's worth quoting the famous speech from President Carter in April 19th of 1977. How many people out here remember that speech? So kind of where I'm going to go with this. But I think it's important to listen to those words because it shows us how we always are looking at things at a snapshot in time. President Carter told the American people, quote, "The oil and natural gas that we rely on for 75% of our energy are simply running out. In spite of increased effort, domestic production is dropping steadily by about 6% a year. Imports have doubled in the last 5 years. Our nation's economic and political independence is becoming increasingly vulnerable. Unless profound changes are made to lower oil consumption, we now believe that in the early 1980s, the world will be demanding more oil than it can produce." And then he continued with this warning. "We could use up all the proven reserves of oil in the entire world by the end of the next decade." Think about that. This is not to pick on President Carter. He was dealing with real issues at the time. And then Congress and the president were trying to deal with those issues. And one of the things they passed was the National Energy Act of 1978. And as some of you may recall, it had some interesting provisions. First of all, it prohibited the use of natural gas in the production of energy, electric energy. It also had a requirement that every new electric power plant would have the capability to use coal or other alternative fuel sources as a primary means of energy generation. And of course, the goals of this was we had lots of domestic coal, but we didn't have enough natural gas. But think about how things have changed now. With American ingenuity, some help from the Department of Energy Research, we had the shale revolution, hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling, and we've just changed the landscape, not only for the price of gas and oil, but also how we do our generation mix for energy. And so many things are changing because of what we're able to do as people and through technology and things that we can't even see. Now, when we think about all this natural gas that's being produced, in 2017, the United States became a net exporter of natural gas. Think about that from when it was 40 years previous to that when we were importing so much. But also, something else has happened. That was the first time in 60 years that we became a net exporter. Now, as you know, FERC's trying to do its part. After 2 years in which no new LNG project was approved, liquefied natural gas export project, we've now approved 3 projects. Now, this is important because it's providing a lot of opportunities, not just for direct investment, where there's going to be billions of dollars invested in the American economy, thousands of new jobs for American workers, but it's also giving new tools to policymakers. We're able to have and give our policymakers, the President, Congress, the tools to maybe push against Russian strategies and how they want to use their natural gas. We're able to create a more liquid market for natural gas that is able to drive down the price. These are all things that are very important. They may not be things that I'm trying to make my decision on because I'm looking at the law and the facts, but it can't be denied that these things are having profound impacts both on our domestic economy and on our foreign policy. And of course, all this production of natural gas has also meant that we're having a lot more natural gas pipelines that are either seeking to be built or to expand. And of course, those things are coming before the Commission as well. And so I know that we're looking at those, each and every one of them, very seriously and trying to make the right decision based on what's the evidence, how does our certificate policy apply, and trying to make the decisions in the right way, also while taking a hard look at the environmental issues as required to by NEPA. The same story is on oil. I know some of you practice in the oil area, and though FERC doesn't regulate the siting of oil pipelines, we do regulate rates, and that's obviously something that's very important. And making sure for financing, we recognize that rates are very important in terms of the financing side to make sure that the oil pipelines are built. So these are things that we struggle with each and every day at the Commission and that we know are very important. But what's really important on these issues are what you all do to inform us. I kind of have the easy job in one sense. I get to look at the record. But I've been there when you look at a blank sheet of paper and you realize, I got to write a response or I got to do an application. That's hard. It might be a little hard for me to figure out sometimes what you guys have written, but that's usually my fault, not y'all's. But the point is that this process is so important, and what you all do is so important to making sure that our fellow commissioners, that we do a good job. But there's something else that we deal with, and I know many of you deal with it as well, and that is dealing with electricity policy. Now, when you think about it, for almost 100 years, the electric grid was operated by vertically integrated state monopolies for electric generation, transmission, and distribution. And of course, going back to 1977, that's when PURPA was passed, which started to open the door a little bit for competition for renewables and cogen facilities. Then in 1992, Congress passed the Energy Policy Act, which really gave a nudge for FERC to open up the wholesale electric markets. And then we had, these incredible orders, 888, the follow-ups with 889, 890, 1000, all these opening up the transmission and the generation to make the process more transparent, to develop competition. And we've really seen a transformation of the energy markets, the electric markets in this country. And it's really something amazing when you think about that we were able to make that transition. Now, of course, that transition, there's always going to be challenges with it, but we should never lose sight that we were able to do something. We were able to move towards markets, and that is something that's really made a big difference. It's also helped give us the ability to let the market choose how we're going to be generating electricity. Of course, that there's policy implications that go into it, whether it's state RPS programs, whether it's federal tax policy, but it's still, the markets are being able to allow different resources to compete. And we've seen the results of that, along with reductions in natural gas prices. Natural gas is now fueling 35% of electric generation. That's up from 24% in 2010. And then renewables, we're now up to 18%, where 7% is hydro, 6.5% is solar or wind, and solar's at 2.3%, with biomass and geothermal at 1.9%. And they're all growing. And it's all because we're giving opportunities and the market is trying to function. But we also know that there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of legitimate concerns about what's going on in the market. We're constantly debating, capacity markets, price formation, environmental goals, state energy goals, environmental policy goals, federal policy goals, market manipulation issues. All this is getting thrown in. But of course, there's one overarching goal, making sure that the lights go on when the customer needs it or when the industry needs it. But all this comes with one fundamental thing that's very important to me. I know it's important to a lot of people in this room, and that is that markets are the best way to allocate resources and set prices. That's something very important. A well-functioning market is one that creates an even playing field and doesn't pick winners and losers. But there's something we need to recognize is we don't have free markets in these FERC-regulated markets. They're FERC-organized, FERC-regulated, and that means that, how many of you love looking at 1,000 pages of tariffs? How many of you are making a good living looking at 1,000 pages of tariffs? But the point being with that is that there is a lot of complication to it, and that when you create complication in markets, you lose something that markets are so important for, and that is exchanging information. The fundamental theory behind why markets are better than bureaucratic control is because it's impossible for any bureaucrat, and I'm just a glorified bureaucrat, to know everything. Markets are the things that exchange information, individuals exchanging information. That's what makes a really pure flowing market. So what we're trying to do, and what I know you all are trying to do, is we're trying to make sure if we don't have a free market, how can we have the best functioning market? And that is one of the most important goals and activities that FERC engages in. Now, there's a few specific things that FERC is also dealing with. We can talk about the big policy issues and everything else, but there's some important little pieces, because the little pieces matter, right? We all know that. Two things that are going on right now. I know you've had some sub-conferences on that during this past day and a half, and that is transmission incentives and ROE, the return on equity. In March, we issued 2 notice of inquiries to get information on whether we should be changing or reapplying how we do ROE and transmission incentives. On transmission side, as I mentioned, I used to get certificates to build transmission lines at the state level. These are challenging issues, but issues that FERC decide influences the ability of the local utility to get a return. And, there's money at risk, and so you got to think about those things, and I know you're going to be informing that. There's also concerns about, are there overbuilding? And there's concerns by landowners about, is there an incentive to overbuild? These are all things that are very important. I can't prejudge them, but I know that there's issues out there, and that FERC knows there's issue out there, and that's why we want you to participate and provide us your information. Provide us the information so we can make a better decision about what transmission policy should be. And then there's the fun one, ROE. I recall sitting in 2-week rate cases, listening to all the experts, proxy groups, and, should we use CAPM or DCF, or how do we mix it? And, it's really important stuff, really complicated stuff as well. And it's always fun to see the battle of the experts on this. But as we know, raising capital is one of the most important things to being able to get infrastructure built. It's great to say that we want a new gas pipeline, we want a new oil pipeline, we need to build new transmission lines, but somebody's got to come up with the capital to do it. And so ROE is an important issue in that. And the balance there, of course, is how do you attract enough capital by having a sufficient enough ROE, but how do you make sure that you're not overbuilding? How do you make sure that you're not gold plating? These are very complicated issues, and there's always people on all different sides of it. So I urge all of you, your clients, make sure that you participate in this. Make sure you inform us about these issues. It's very important for us to understand and not to assume, that old great phrase, don't assume what's not in evidence. Well, I live by that. I want to know what's in the evidence. But all of this is very important for us to understand, make good decisions. And, what's been most exciting for me joining FERC is that I'm learning every single day. I like to think about, when I was 26 years old, was out of law school, was, then at a law firm, then doing policy work, and I knew everything. Everything was black and white. I knew all the facts, and I knew where we were supposed to go. Now that I'm in my 50s, I realize how little I know. And that's what's really exciting about this job, is that I get to learn something each and every day. And the pleadings that you all file, the things that get presented to us at FERC, they make my job fun because I get to learn something. I get to learn from the experts and learn something new. And that's what's really exciting. And so hopefully by doing that, hopefully my decisions are a little bit better. Hopefully our policies are a little bit better. And hopefully we're making energy policy better for all Americans. And at the end of the day, that's what I see as my goal, is make the decision, try and make sure that we have good policy, and try and make sure that everybody has had their voice heard. So thank you very much, and I'll take a few questions.
If anyone has questions for the commissioner, he's willing to take questions now.
I've either wowed you or bored you. Maybe both.
First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a privilege to be able to hear you, and also we're delighted that you've chosen us as a forum for chatting. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear that you grew up in front of a state commission. I did also, and so I'm sure you appreciate the important role that states play in the framework of regulating energy nationwide. The line between federal and state jurisdiction has always been a fascinating one, drawn in the Federal Power Act as long ago as there was a Federal Power Act into the 30s. And in every generation, the issues resonate a little differently. They resonated certainly with respect to the development of competition through the 80s and 90s, and now they resonate as well with respect to environmental issues, which are not directly on your doorstep by statute, but inevitably are an aspect of what you have to consider. So I was curious to know if you had any broad reflections on the role that the states and the federal government play vis-a-vis one another, and how you'll handle some of the controversies coming up in the broadest way, without respect to any individual proceeding.
That's great. Well, that's a very good question. And, the tension between the state and the federal government in our jurisdiction is it's inherent. I mean, it's the whole structure of our Constitution, right? And that's not a bad thing. We all seem to have this desire, if you think about it, we want a unified answer to everything, right? And this tension, whether it's on environmental policy, whether it's on how permitting works, there's always the controversies on, environmental permits, water permits. Things are in tension, but that's why it's cooperative federalism mainly. And there's no one answer to it. You got to look at the issues, but you can't be afraid of it. The fundamental point is Congress, well, first we start with the Constitution. You always start with that. And then you look at, under, let's say, electricity for the Federal Power Act, clearly Congress has said generation decisions are going to be at the state level. And then, of course, as you get into the market issues, you're kind of having this mix of, well, what's really transmission, what's really generation, what's going on. And these are hard questions, and I know they're questions that we're being asked. And, my approach to this is, don't think that you have to have the unified answer to everything. Recognize what the challenges are. Recognize that tension is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It goes back to the point about everybody having their voice heard. You want the states to have their voice heard. You want local landowners to have their voice heard. But you also want the person who's developing the project to have their voice heard. And you have to understand that whether it's FERC, EPA, the local Environmental Quality Commission, they all have a say in this. And that's good, because you know what? More information should never scare us. It's always better to have more information, to be able to understand what's going on, and at the end of the day, to make those hard decisions where ultimately there's probably going to be a winner and a loser, to make a decision about what's the right thing to do. So trying to avoid answering your question too directly, but at least you maybe get an idea of kind of what my core principle is going into that. Thank you.
Two questions for you. One is a fun one, which is what's the biggest surprise that's hit you at FERC that sort of you didn't expect? And two, I know you said that you like to have the evidence, but you know energy policy is really choices and consequences as opposed to right and wrong. What makes a compelling brief for you, or what do you look for as advice to all the practitioners in the room?
Okay, both very good. I'll take the easy one first. The weirdest thing about being a commissioner is when somebody says, Commissioner McNamee. It's like, I'm just not used to that, you know? I've always been the policy guy, you know? It's just kind of weird. You just don't expect that. But kind of the practical thing, you're right, that not everything is clear-cut in the facts. Often there are policy judgments you have to make, but I always want those policy judgments informed by the facts and by the law, because sophistry is very easy, especially when you practice law. It's very easy to organize not easy always, but it's often you can organize the facts and you can organize the law to get to the point you want to get to. I mean, we're paid to do that when we're representing our clients. You do it in an ethical manner, but that's how the system works. You have the thesis and the antithesis, and hopefully you get to the middle ground. Don't go reporting them Hegelian because I use thesis and antithesis. But my point being is that process does help inform. And so I guess the two things I look for in pleadings. One, I do want facts. I think it's often helpful to have an anecdote to explain the facts. But also don't oversell the position. If the facts are good and the law is good, they will speak for themselves. If they're oversold, sometimes you may start to have doubts about what do the facts and what do the law really say. So that's advice I've given when I've worked in law firms to associates or on the Hill, and I think it's something that applies in how I look at things. All right, well, it looks like I wowed you, and that's great. So, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Commissioner McNamee. Really appreciate you being here with us today and your remarks. With that, that brings to close our luncheon. We have two sessions coming up at 2 o'clock, so you have about 15 minutes. The first on LNG exports, and the second one is ethics jeopardy. Alex Trebek may be there in the flesh. We don't know. Thank you, guys.